All right, let's get the show on the road. Oh, look at this, we're already late. Welcome, everybody. First SeaRUG meeting of 2014. This is exciting. What a turnout. I think last time I checked, the RSVPs was about 126, give or take a few that didn't RSVP. I think that we're probably a little bit more than that. Did I have these on a loop? Maybe. Anyway, welcome. And for those of you that don't know me, because I'm a new face up here, my name is David D'Arsa, and I've relieved Rob of his role as president of Seattle Revit User Group, and he's now a board advisor, which pays exactly half of the president gig, but double what at large used to. Yeah. So anyway, little background on me for those of you who don't know me. It's hard to say this, but I've been doing this stuff in one capacity or another for about 20 years now. And wow, that is scary. And I am particularly proud to be part of this group. I've been part of SeaRUG for many, many years now, and it's interesting that it's evolved right along with the industry, I think. And you know, I just want to point to your attention that the president and vice president chairs of the board of advisors for this group are now held by builders rather than architects. Please do not leave the room because of that. It will be okay. But I think it definitely echoes what's going on in the industry. And the reality is that Revit and BIM have really opened up the era of collaboration in our industry. And I think that it's the most exciting time to be in the AEC industry that I've ever witnessed. And a great deal of that is because of that collaboration and how it enables people to really come together and work. And frankly, I couldn't be happier. So a couple of things to go through here. Let me get back to the beginning of my slides here. I have them on a loop. Didn't really mean to do that. We have a really great program for you today, and I think that we have a really great program for you this year. One of the things that I want to make sure that we do throughout this year is to really engage you. This is a community-based group, and at the beginning, during the music and while you were getting your lunch, you might have noticed there were a few pictures up there of some models and a few exhibits. You probably also noticed that there was just 4 of them, and they were on a loop, and that seems a little bit lame. In a way, I kind of wanted that to be a little bit lame because I wanted to say, I want to open that space for you. Haven't quite figured out how, but we're going to set up a way that you can reach us, and if you have something cool that you're working on, a nice screenshot, a cool model, that you can put your stuff up there and put credits. You can have your name and your company name up there and show the group, this is what we're working on. So I hope as the year goes on that looping screenshot slideshow gets bigger and bigger. So again, this is really all about you, the Revit users, and the AEC community in Seattle, which I think is one of the most vibrant and exciting in the country. So I'm going to be pretty quick after this, and today we actually are going to roll right into our feature presentation, and the reason for that is I believe this might be the first time we've done this, but this meeting is actually brought to you by us, by SeaRUG, and we don't really have a feature sponsor. You know, we still have, this year we have our 3 VARs that are our associate partners, or excuse me, our executive partners, PPI, Ideate, and Imagine It. And later on in the year, they're going to have their programs that, like you know and love, like we've always had. We also have premier partners. ABC Imaging is returning, and we're welcoming PacificCAD as a new premier partner. And take a look at this list of associate partners, because that is you guys, and that is who is sponsoring this meeting today. It's possible because we've had the associate partners, and the way that we've done our sponsorships throughout the year now to be a little bit of a different model where we get all of our commitments up front, we're able to put 1 or 2 meetings a year where we can make sure that, and this is in no means negative towards the executive partners, but we have the opportunity to control the agenda ourselves and to not necessarily have to show a new product or show a demo, but we can get into really the nuts and bolts of the usage of BIM and of Revit. And that's what I think is so exciting about the panel that we have today, which is a real-world application of the things that we usually talk about, the things that you know and that you do at your office, This is what I believe to be a really great application of the technology and a great evolution of where it's going, bringing things from your computer in the office out to the field and really starting to leverage what for so many years designers, engineers have been doing behind their desk at their computers and bringing it out and, actually digging in the dirt and making it all happen. So I'm not going to ramble on for much longer. The only thing that I wanted to do was ask the board members to stand up and be recognized. And, I won't pretend that this is, a life commitment and a whole lot of work behind the scenes, but there is some. We try to make it to where we have a balance, but the reality is that you have a group of people that are dedicated to bringing you really great content and making this a great community that it is. So why don't you guys stand up and get recognized for your efforts. We have a new position in the board this year, which is Sean Burke with MBBJ. He's our social media chair. So there's going to be some more, again, in keeping with the concept of engaging the community and reaching out. There's going to be some nice initiatives having to do with social media, keeping you informed of other things out there, and also trying to reach out to some of the other groups. We've had conversations with the New York City Revit user group and things like that to try and, see what momentum they have, take a look at what they're doing on their neck of the woods, and see how we can leverage it and share some of what we're doing. And lastly, I definitely want to thank Rob for his previous stewardship of this group, and it's been a pretty easy transition for me. I feel like I'm coming, to be president of a group that's very well established, and a lot of legwork has been done, and I'm really lucky. And Rob, that's your doing, so thank you very much.
Okay, so like David said, this is our first presentation in 2014, and it's going to be a little different. This is a panel of our project managers, project engineers, and architects. This way, you can see the real-world application of Revit and BIM and what you're doing. And I'm really thankful that these guys came along and that they're participating with this. And I really hope that you guys can see how BIM and VDC all go hand in hand with this. So what I'm going to do here is just go over this agenda really quickly. So the first portion of this agenda will be how and why Lewis builds the model. Why would a contractor want to bother with a model? We understand why MEP or architects would, but why does the construction side want to deal with this? And then we have 2 case studies that will come through, and we'll show you how BIM was started in design and then how it was migrated out into construction. And the very last aspect of it, I think, is really critical, is the ROI. This study was done not by us, but by the client, and I think that's going to be a real interesting aspect for you. So these case studies that we have, it's a panel discussion, so these guys are going to be talking, but we would like you to engage these guys. The biggest question probably is, why would an architect or a structural engineer want the contractor to use their model? So if you've never heard about Lease Crutcher Lewis, we're a 128-year-old company located here in Seattle. We're on First and Spring. We're going to be moving down to Blanchard and Western onto the old Union Stables, hopefully League Gold for that building. And we have a second office that's down in Portland. And I guess one of our big projects, Via 6, down on 6th and Lenora, and you'll be seeing 2 of those other projects as we go through. So the panel that we have here for you today, we have Alan Stewart, the first gentleman here. He's a project manager with Lease Crutcher Lewis for the UW Bothell. We have Dan Rooney, who's a BIM coordinator, BIM modeler. He was also on the UW Bothell team. We have Craig Stauffer from PCS Structural Solutions. He was also on UW Bothell. Then we have our Lakeside team, which is Brian Gray, who is a PE with Lease Crutcher Lewis, and then Jeff Floor with LMN Architects. So we were hopeful that we could capture the engineers and the architects and design side with our construction team. So let's talk about the Lewis approach. Here's our 6 BIM Commandments. I'm not reading them to you. Basically, it's lean, it's real, and it's a better product at the end of the day for everyone involved. Let you read a little bit more of that, but that's what we put up there for ourselves, that we have to meet that principle. So let's start talking about where we start as a contractor with this whole BIM VDC aspect of it. We're going to be down here in pre-construction. We may not have a model. We may simply have PDFs. We may simply have DWG files. We may have a napkin sketch. Well, we're going to take that and we're going to build a model from that. Well, why would we want to build a model simply along those lines? Well, once it's in there, you see we have the Revit schedules. Well, you want to see how much it would cost you to change out your exterior skin. We can do that iteration, and we can do the iteration very quickly. If you want to change your interior partitions, you want to go from, maybe 6-unit apartment to an 8-unit apartment on per floor. We can figure that out very quickly. The other aspect of it is on a napkin sketch or maybe even these 2D drawings, we're going to notice things are missing. We're going to notice, wait a minute, the foundations aren't actually large enough. We know from how we build things that, well, we're going to need more concrete. So we get a better number right in pre-construction as we're going forward. But remodeling isn't lean. We don't want to have to remodel. So we want to engage the architect, and we want to engage the architect very early. I know you're all sitting out there going, oh, please, I don't want the contractor in talking to me in SD. Guess what? We really do want to be there early on. We want to be able to talk to you and say, hey, can we influence how you're going to model things? Because if we can influence how you model things, we have a collaborative environment right out the get-go. From that collaborative environment, maybe we can have you just draw your columns from floor to floor instead of from footing to roof. That makes a big difference for us in our quantities. So we ask, can you do that for us? It might be no, that's fine, but we're going to ask. So the next thing that we do is, okay, you say no. Okay, well then my next question to you is, can I embed my Revit schedules from Lewis in your model? Now what I'm going to do is ask for maybe 5 of these schedules. These schedules will have our shared parameters and Revit's parameters and calculated values that we find critical when we're putting our numbers together. But that's why we want to work with you. And if you think about it, engaging us early doesn't hurt your process. And we're not taking over your process. I want to make that clear. We're simply working with you in that level of design development. So you're in 200, we want to work with you to get that up to 300. We want to work with you to bring that up into 400. And if you think about it, technically we've never built a building from construction documents. Anyone shocked from that comment? You shouldn't be. We build from the RFIs and the ASIs and the construction documents. So now the model, if it captures all that, you've got everything right there. So the next thing is, if you're not modeling, we model things that aren't even in our scope. Why would a contractor who does self-perform concrete work draw rebar? We find it critical that if we can put the rebar in there, we know it fits. We have better confidence that that element that we put in there is correct. We build it, we put the parametric parameters in there. So now we've got a template that we can either use for the next job or we can use as is further down the line. So right now we talked about the architect's model, maybe a structural engineer's model. We definitely have a Lewis concrete model. So what happens is we're creating what's called the federated process, the federated model. You've heard that comment before. It's a master model that contains everything. And we do this for the points that you see up on the screen there. We can vet those inaccuracies. We can find if something is outbound of a wall. We can find if the steel isn't what the steel's supposed to be. So this process to us is very important. And the most important aspect of it is that we capture all the ASIs, and you'll hear about BIM cons from the UW Bothell team and the RFIs. And we're working with you as we're progressing the model. So let me show you some examples of what I'm talking about for design assist, constructability review, and identifying conflicts. So this first one here, I guess you can read that. You can never tell when you're working on your station at work. But we have here, we're still in design at this point, and we're looking at this, and all of a sudden someone realizes, wait a minute, the architect's model, the way it's designed, and the way the structural engineer has designed it, you can't get that duct supported. We're literally just not touching, so it's not supported at all. And we're not cantilevering, so we've got a problem. And that's simply for the architect. Another example is when we work with you, if we're laying out interior partitions. That sounds crazy to some people, but we're using the model and get the point, as Lakeside will talk about, to lay out some of these interior walls. And if we're working with the architect, we can find these issues, and maybe you've got double gyp on the wrong side. We're not there to criticize you. We're there to make the process quicker, easier, faster, more efficient. The constructability review, again, as you see here, there's a dimensional issue that shows up that you might not have noticed, that with the footing versus the slab for the dock. We see that, we've modeled it, we talked to you about it. And then we can also, again, identify conflicts and identify them earlier. You see that we have the structural engineer's Revit model, and then we have our supplier's Revit model. This is before we've gone out to the field. We're like, wait a minute, those two don't match. That's a problem. But if we find it now, instead of being out in the field, guess what? We've got time. And that time allows us to come up with a better answer, not the answer that gets done right now, which is what's been happening in construction for a very long time, is you have to fix it, you've got to fix it now, however you can get it done. Now we can think about it. We have breathing room. So now when we get out there and we start building from the model, how are we actually going to be doing that process? So right now is we have the shop drawing review inside of the model, a digital review. This is really the next step that we should all be doing. You see right here we have our grade beam, we have the anchor bolts coming in as the shop drawing is placed into the model, and it doesn't fit. We find it now versus finding it in the field. So we have the virtually constructed model. And it's a federated model now also. You'll notice that we're doing shop drawing review. If we do shop drawing review after we clash, we actually end up with this condition. I've got anchor bolts interceding into my rebar. That's a bad condition. If we clash first and then have the shop drawings submitted, the review process we know is good because we've already clashed it, we've already seen it fits, and the shop drawings being made from that model, not on a dual process in 2D drawing somewhere else, means we have a better workflow. It's cleaner. It costs less headaches. Another example that we did is we actually took another model, laid it over ours, cut the section for section for section, did the dimensioning right along line with it. This process might seem redundant, but it wasn't. We were reviewing, and it was actually more accurate, and it didn't take any more time. So now that we've done the shop drawings, and we've gone through and we've clashed and then done the shop drawings, we then want to do the field assembly. We literally now have a virtually constructed building. We got to get that out of the computer and onto the ground, in the dirt. So how do we maximize this BIM thing that we have? Well, we do that by creating work packages. The traditional process, as we talked about before, is fix the problem as fast as possible when it's found. Well, we've identified all these problems before we ever got to the field. So now we create what are called work packages, and we do these by zones. And what these work packages look like is literally everything needed for that zone is right there. So we have the penetrations that we might need through there. We have all the PT heads for the slabs that might be needed there. We have the details that the guys in the field may have to go through 10 different sheets of paper to find the right detail. Those details live there. You also know the schedule. So we had a schedule in Precon, and now we've got a schedule out here in the field. This schedule in the field, we've actually been able to quantify that this schedule, when we check the quantities of concrete and we order the trucks to come out, we've actually been able to order our trucks simply from the schedule we have here and not have an overrun or an underrun, had to call another truck back out. So that's why we trust our schedules. We know how much concrete that we need. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to hand this over to the UW Bothell team, which would be Alan Stewart, Dan Rooney, and Craig Stauffer. And these guys are going to talk to you about what we call the Lewis +1. This was what Lewis does, but now what are these guys going to do that make our process a little better, a little more efficient? So Alan, you want this or you want that?
No, I'll just stand. All right, so as Lana said, my name is Alan. I'm the project engineer on for Lease Crutcher Lewis for the UW B3 project. Basically, the job is it's a 78,000 square foot STEM building, so your science, technology, engineering, mathematics. It had a 21-month duration, and it was a $62 million budget. And construction on this building actually started with 45% CDs based on the timeline the university gave us and their funding from the state. So knowing that we're starting with the 45% CDs, we came up with a new tool. We called it the BIM Conflict Log. It's a new means to communicate with the subcontractors, offer our design assist, and provide constructability review all at the same time. Basically, the process originated as an internal process within Lewis that is something that we would do during pre-construction. And since basically this job started in pre-construction with actual footings on the ground, we thought it would be good to kind of carry this through the construction on this project. It basically ended up replacing the RFI process. And almost everything that you're going to see today, to a certain extent, correct. Later on in the job, we did end up running into items where they kind of were traditional RFIs, where the field found them, and as opposed to us finding them in the design process. So quickly, later on, I'm going to go over the differences between what we call a BIM Con and a traditional RFI. But basically, the process for the BIM Con was we identified the issue, we captured it in a PDF, and that PDF can be taken from a model shot, a snapshot off of a 2D drawing, or a 3D PDF, or whatever it may be. We then posted in the Bluebeam. Again, I'll go over that here in a little bit, and also posted it to our WebPM log. Basically, the WebPM, that's our internal SharePoint site, and we used it as a communication tool for both the subcontractors, the owner, and design team. On a weekly basis, we had a collaborative working session where we had the subcontractors, the architect, any engineers needed to be, and actually in our case, we had the owner's architect and engineer involved also. And then, so basically during those sessions, the architect engineer would confirm the issue would be closed, we post that back up to WebPM, notify all the subs, and then all those changes were then made to the individual contractor's model. So as an example, this is one that we found when we were doing the MEP clash detection. We brought on our steel stud guy right after we hired the MEP guys, which is kind of unheard of. So here we found that our drain pipes were going to be crisscrossing the structural steel studs. And so typically the photo on the right would actually be where you found it in the field. So now the steel stud guy's coming up and all of a sudden he sees these drain lines and now you got an RFI. So these guys are sitting out there. You're now wasting time and money and schedule waiting for an answer on what we're going to do with this, this conflict here. So in the model, we were able to see that, yes, there is going to be a clash there between the structural studs and the rain leaders. And we were able to put everything into our Bluebeam Studio session and take all the details from the drawings, include them in here, and during one collaborative work session, everyone was able to come in, make their comments. We actually saw on this one that we were going to have a problem with the anchor details on the masonry also. So on a normal job, you would have had an RFI on the pipe conflicting with the structural steel studs, and a couple months later, you would have had another RFI on the masonry anchors. So in this, we were able to solve everything in just one shot by taking a look at all the details, getting all the subcontractors involved. You know, our masonry sub was the one that actually came up with this. And then everyone, while we're doing the session, everyone was actually able to come in here and add their comments, and we resolved it on that typical Wednesday meeting. One of the reasons we decided to go with the Bluebeam Studio is you can kind of see right there, that one comment has got the grayed out nodes on it. Only the person that is making the comment can change that comment. So nobody else involved in the session can log in and make a change to that comment. So a lot of times we'll have the architect concerned about the integrity of the design and his comments on on an RFI in an electronic format. Well, this kind of resolves that in that nobody else can make changes to their comments. Yeah?
So can we ask a question?
Yeah.
So this is the concern to me in architecture land. We're getting more and more collaborative at the front end. Contractors being hired and saying, hey, you're hired. That's great. That's a great thing. But for instance, I've had several contractors who said, oh, well, we're going to get the curtain wall folks and we're going to self-perform concrete. They're on board. And the MEP design builders, if that's the proper way to go, they'll be on board. But as an example, we're not going to bring the flooring people on because they're the tail end of the dog and who cares. Except the designer has already picked a 6 by 36 inch long tile. And unless we all understand floor flatness and they're prepared to lay an underlaying down or whatever else to get that flat floor, that 6 by 36 inch tile is going to look like this. But since they only want to engage the really big subs. They don't want to engage the smaller subs. They don't get into the early part of the process where we're trying to drag decisions earlier in the job. So I guess my question is, when do you, or when did you, engage your structural steel stud folks and your and the mechanical, the plumbing subcontractor and the mason? So is this all the way into construction, or is this still early construction? Because that makes a difference. You know, you're not going to catch everything in design.
Yeah. So we hired everybody months earlier than you would typically see, and in a lot of cases they said, "Wait, you don't want us to start till when?" And we're like, "We want you to come in with your drafter and modeler right now." And in most cases, we actually had them bring in the foreman also, because he's going to be the guy out in the field building it. And a lot of times, the drafters will draft something and then come to find out that's not how the field guy wants to install it. And then as far as the tile, you know, we did have large format tiles on this job. And so what we did is instead of doing a 1/2 inch recess, we ended up making it almost 1 inch. And then there was that extra leeway in there, and just told them, you have 1 inch, not a 1/2 inch, as it calls out in the documents, even though we hired them later on. So that's how, you know, we saw that as a problem. And that's one of the things that we did talk about with THA, who was the architect on this job. You know, we were going to increase that thickness so that, and then we'll just bring it up with the tile contractor.
Okay, so you hire as early as you can. They're essentially mobilizing, but they're mobilizing one drafter or foreman.
Correct. Yeah. Great. And we, in our bid documents, we make that pretty clear. And we actually include in our schedules, we show that, you know, we want these guys on board early, but it's not your full crew. So,
great, thank you.
Not a problem. So the other thing that Bluebeam Studio does is kind of over on the right here, it's a blown up shot. It actually records everything that happens within that studio session. So here you can kind of see people are logging in, logging out, they're making comments, they're adding rectangles. And after it gets up to about 3,000, we'll actually take this log and we'll save it, a hard copy to our server, and then we'll always have that record. So if there's ever any question about, you know, what was the process on RFI 1? We can actually go back into our log and see, you know, kind of what the process was.
And who was there.
And that's kind of our backup, like who was involved in the conversation that day. And that's kind of our backup, as you would normally see it like on an RFI. Once we get the studio session set up, we actually send out an invite to the subcontractors, the owner's reps, the owner's architect, engineer, as I said earlier in our case, and the subs. And then if there's, you can kind of see up here, this is kind of typical. We had, you know, 4 or 5 open BIM cons at a time. And so we'd, you know, call up the subs that were involved in those BIM cons and have them, you know, log in remotely on the session. So some of the main differences between a BIM con and an RFI. BIM cons encourage collaborative approach. You're able to identify multiple issues, as I kind of pointed out on an earlier slide, in one conflict. You're identifying things early. It gives the team the opportunity to find the best value solution. And then early identification, you know, typically weeks or even months earlier, limits your budget and your schedule impact. As I'll get into when I talk about the ROI and metric stuff, we'll show that, you know, in a lot of the changes that were actually made during the design ended up having no effect on our budgets. So traditional RFIs, a majority of the conflicts are noted while the work is being placed, which impacts not only your schedule, but each one of those questions now becomes a cost. Each RFI has an initial cost to generate and answer. Only one conflict is identified at a time. Sometimes you might catch another item that might be affected, but in my experience, you don't, and then you end up having multiple RFIs in the same area. There's always the pressure to answer quickly, limiting typical response, or your best response possible. So our architect kind of had some of the reservations that we typically see out of an architect, and he did this presentation with us. He wasn't able to make it today at the NWCCC, and he had a quote that I asked him if we could use, and he said yes. So originally he had reservations about us using our model and using it as a jumping off point for our BIM, but in the end, he noted that it resulted in a more comprehensive understanding of the entire project by everyone involved. And he felt like he didn't lose control, but he actually gained more control and had a better understanding of the job by allowing us to use his model. So I'm going to now turn it over to Brian.
Why don't we ask, see if they...
Oh, sorry, forgot it was a panel. Has anybody got any, I'm used to this being a presentation. Yes?
What kind of project delivery method, I might have missed that, was used for this project? Is it design build?
No, there's a GCCM, low bid, yeah.
And ECCM.
Yeah, it was a GCCM, ECCM, and an MCCM.
Right.
So, yeah.
Just inherit the architect's model and then move it into your construction model, or do you guys work on the same model?
We actually, so we took their model and then we use it as an overlay more, and kind of we use it as a baseline. I don't know, Dan.
I linked it. I linked his model to mine, and I created a really detailed structural model, and I had it off most of the time, but when there were questions or I needed any information, I'd turn it on, and I'd be able to see exactly what his intent was. And I would also do the same thing with the structural engineer's model, and between the both of them, I'd be able to figure out what the both of them were intending on doing. And
So, in effect, Lease Crutcher Lewis had a standalone model.
I'm sorry.
Yes, yes, we did.
Yeah, we had a standalone model. Yes.
By linking the other two.
Yep.
The federated model.
What's that?
The federated model.
Yeah, it's a federated model. It's just, we did the same thing. We had a lot of discussion with owners as to why we're replicating efforts. It's a big discussion. That's for lawyers.
All right, we had a couple questions over here.
To what extent, if at all, are you using Navisworks Manage for clash detection?
That we use it specifically for clash detection. That's all we use.
So we designed all of our models in Revit, and then when we were doing the clash detection, everything was done in Navisworks.
You have a lot of success with that.
Yes. We actually, on this job, everyone was like, would you dial it back at all? And unanimously across the board, including like Jason, Robin, the design team, they would all say, no, we need to push it further. We had a lot of, everything in there was architectural concrete. Like there's no wall coverings on any of the auditoriums or anything. It's all board form concrete. And in a lot of cases, all the beams and the columns are all smooth. So basically, when we stripped the forms, that was the finished product. And if anything, we'd start putting blockouts in there showing that this is an architectural element. Don't run a pipe down the middle of this beam. So, we would take it further. And
I just had a quick question on BIM. We have these BIM cons, and you identify multiple issues. Do you break that down into separate issues?
no, we all keep it as one issue. And then in our log on that SharePoint site that we keep, we actually make a note of the affected trades and the ones that need to kind of come in and take a look at it. So we actually end up dividing it out per, well, in this case we did it per bid package. Yeah, but on the actual like PDF that we're reviewing and making comments on, it doesn't. It's all just one issue.
GCM delivery method and located for case of like front loading of the cost for subcontractors, A&E, everybody. Are you guys able to put a percentage on the cost as far as traditional method? There's a cost associated with BIM.
Yeah, and so one of the ROI slides I'll show you, the owner actually wanted.
Repeat the question.
Oh, he's curious on kind of if there was cost in. Sorry, say it one more time. Sorry.
There's a cost associated with BIM and front loading the project.
Yes.
Go a little bit and everybody go the traditional path. And the conversation often comes up with owners. There's a cost. And is it worth it? Is there an offset? Is there money saved in the end? Are we going to have a savings at the end?
Yeah. So everybody hear that? So basically he's wondering about, kind of front loading your costs as opposed to having some of this stuff later on in the project. And I actually have a slide. The University of Washington was also curious about that, and they wanted to see what their return on investment was. And when I talk about the ROI and the metrics, I'll actually got a slide that covers that. And if that doesn't answer your question, then definitely ask me again.
Can we have Craig?
Yeah.
Let's see what Craig.
I was going to add one comment. I don't know if everybody can hear me. One comment on using multiple models. We've done it a bunch of different ways, where we've tried to share the models, where we tried this individual builds this part, this design team builds this part, the contractor builds this part. For the most part, that hasn't been successful. I would actually say that errors aren't caught that way. If only one person is modeling a specific area, the other people don't catch if it doesn't quite work. Then you also get into the thing of what's in the architect's model. As a structural engineer, I don't really care about the doorknobs. As the structure, they really don't care about the embeds. The contractor, they care about where they're changing the construction sequencing, where the form pours might stop. It's not as important structurally. What we also find is that, and Botha would be an example, where we talked in quite a bit of detail about where do we think the pours were going to stop and start and stop. And we started early, and we kind of laid our model out that way. And then at the end, it was an entirely different, because the project manager started getting involved, and he saw, well, now that we're looking at everything in fine-tuned detail, rather than stop here, I'd rather stop here. So that's where it is very much a evolution all the way through. We'd all like to say that the decisions we make in SD are the ones that go all the way through construction, but they don't. Just like in pre-con, doesn't stay the same all the way through. So if we're all using different models, we actually find that we're catching more slight conflicts than if we were really sharing one and only building certain parts.
Yeah.
I'm wondering about how much the architect changed their workflow for this new process. And if coding says, model in Revit, but don't model every detail, did they change how much they model for this new process, or did they just, since you were modeling everything?
No, they still did everything the same, and they were changing their model up through 100% CDs. It's just that in most cases, our model is just more detailed than theirs. Yeah.
I guess to kind of add on to that, you say limited details, because obviously architects will put a lot of design intent into the details, even though they won't obviously create them or put them out there. Do you think it limits the amount of those that they put in?
No, because he still had a fair amount of detail pages and call-outs, and then the only thing we would do is then come in and actually take those details and then apply them in the model. And in a lot of cases, we're supposed to have a reveal strip line up. Well, if you follow this detail and this detail, the strips are going to be off a little bit. So then that would end up causing him to go back and revise his details just a little bit. Or in some cases, he said, okay, just change it in the model. So. I'm gonna let Dan handle that one. That's over my head.
I pretty much uploaded my model once a week to the SharePoint site and let the subcontractors do what they wanted to with it. I didn't worry about that stuff, if they caught any mistakes or anything. Hopefully they didn't, but occasionally there would be a mistake that would be caught. They'd bring that issue up to me, and I'd fix it and I'd re-upload it. But I didn't worry about copy monitoring or anything like that. That wasn't. We don't concern ourselves with that.
And you didn't do it in your model either.
No, I didn't do it in my model. Excuse me? No, I didn't notice that.
So since you guys had, it sounds like maybe a dozen models floating around, if there was a change, how did you ensure that got into everybody's model and that they all matched the process?
So besides Dan, we also had a BIM coordinator on the project that kind of oversaw the entire BIM process and the clash coordination. And that was kind of one of his roles as kind of the BIM coordinator, is to make sure that once a week he would take Dan's model, take the electricians, the plumbers, and he'd put them all together. And if there was a change, he would go in there if it was significant enough and make sure that everybody made the change. There was a couple spots where we ended up changing some of the elevations on the slabs and the beams, and we wanted to make sure that you know, the MEP guys, the ceiling guy, and everybody had incorporated that in their change. No. Basically after 100% CDs, there wasn't really any changes to the design models. So right now, our model is probably the most comprehensive, like, detail of what's actually been built, more so than even the red lines.
Yeah, and most of what was coordinated and changed in the contractor's model wasn't necessarily on our model. We would make some subtle changes here and there, but reinforcing conflicts and everything, the reinforcing wasn't modeled within ours, so therefore we weren't going back in and shifting a tie here or there. Yeah, for the most part, the things that were being altered here and there were just contained in their model to begin with.
So as for record drawings, how are you doing it?
So on this job, we're kind of in a gray area because we have contract documents that say that we need 6 Mylars, 6 hard copies.
Delivered by
And
carrier pigeon.
so we sat down with the university and said, we're going to give you 2 hard copies, we're going to give you a PDF of all of our red lines, and we're going to give you the model. And we're also going to provide another record set that is the model kind of sectioned off, and instead of showing the 3D pipe, and this is where, Dan, you might have to help me with this, dumb it down to where it just ends up being a single line. And my understanding is that, you know, with the technology that we have, we're able to do that these days. So we're going to give them basically more than what they were hoping for. The University of Washington, their Bothell campus is very technology savvy, and so they don't even want the 2D drawings. They want the model and the CAD backgrounds. And there's one more question over there.
What are you guys doing with the design models before 100% or 100% CD? Are you like just trying to keep your model up to what the changes are going on, and then you start to go with it after that point?
From a design flow, I wouldn't say that it was a lot different, other than we were having conversations with Lewis as we were going through, knowing that our model was also floating to them. The flow from SD to DD to CD kind of remained the same. I emphasize kind of, in that in a GCCM we can push things forward a little bit sooner because we know the contractor's involved. We can also make some decisions on some costs a little bit earlier because, okay, well, rather than head in a direction with this design, let's get some quick cost numbers back, and we might decide this way is the way we're going to go. But for the most part, we handled our model with the architect just like we normally would. But like I said, we also knew that when we released our model, Lewis would see it and maybe importing it into theirs. So that allowed us to maybe have some conversations with them that you wouldn't normally have had.
There was another question over there.
All right, any other last questions before I turn it over to Lakeside? We can ask, again, we'll have a Q&A at the end of this also, so.
So if the project is finished, you get all the documents together with structural and put all the RFI changes in their model to the closeout?
Yes, but that's the question was with the will the structural, architectural, will we put all the RFI changes back into our documents? That there would be the comment about why are we doing that if they're doing it, and if it because we have a contract that says we have to deliver 6 Mylars. We will still be doing it. I know UW Bothell wants the model and everything, but we also know that it'll get archived by PDF into the very elaborate system that UW has, but that's how you get the documents, so we will still be going back through. But for the most part, we kept track of that as construction cycle was going, so it's not like we're getting a stack of 50 RFIs and now having to go back in and model them. We were making the changes as we went. But I'll add one more piece, and you kind of touched on it, that where we saw the biggest advantage going through is that we always joke that if you had RFIs during design, that list would be incredibly overwhelming. We just don't refer to them as RFIs. In construction, it's where it's kind of got turning the 3-letter word into the 4-letter word for quite a while. Now we've all got a lot more comfortable with what that means, We still had RFIs. Every BIM con was probably 5 or 6 RFIs. The advantage is we were building it 3 weeks before the contractor was standing over it saying, this doesn't fit. So on site, we were incredibly impressed how smooth and quick. And I would bet the guys with the tool belts on doing the hard work every day felt everything went together great, not knowing that these guys still asked all the questions. So it was very advantageous from that, and so much in the typical construction cycle, we're answering a question quickly so that we can keep things moving even though we know that's the wrong answer. Because yes, we can shift that, but when we shift that now, it can have it done in an hour, but it's gonna mess something up 3 weeks from now. But no one really cares about 3 weeks from now, they care about then. In the BIM cons, we were able to encapsulate the fix so that we weren't messing stuff up later on in a much more relaxed, no one breathing down the neck environment because no one has anything to do until we get an answer. So
yeah, in our structure package, actually, we were putting footings in the ground right after the 45% of CDs were issued. And in a lot of cases, we were changing stuff on the first floor as columns were getting formed. So being able to build that in the virtual world first greatly helped out. There's a good example, we didn't include it in this slide, but our forming sub, they designed everything in the model. We compared it to our concrete model, and there's a great example of where they brought their forms out and we had pre-poured a bunch of footings, and their forms were within a half an inch all the way around, and nothing was ever greater than a half an inch out. They never had to cut anything in the field, and they were just literally bringing it out of their factory and placing it, and we were pouring. Mm-hmm. It was incredibly smooth. So, all right, Brian?
Just to touch on the field guys, they don't look for drawings anymore. They don't look for construction documents anymore. They come into the office and they're looking for work package drawings. They're not even, saying, where's the architectural drawings, where's the structural drawings. Those aren't even conversations anymore. They're coming straight in and asking for work package drawings, and because they're confident that with all the information that we put into these with the RFIs or BIM cons, the ASIs, the structural drawings and the architectural drawings, they know that everything that they need to build whatever they're building is going to be located on these work package drawings, and they love them. They wouldn't want to go back to the other way, and that's not my opinion. That's what I've been told. So.
Well, thanks, Alan and Craig and Dan for talking about that. Like we said, we'll have more Q&A after this, but Alan will go through and talk about the ROI from that project. So Brian Gray was the PE for the Lakeside School District. So this again is a +1. So what the Bothell team had developed then is used at Lakeside, and then Lakeside themselves added onto it. So they have a really great story to talk about. And I have the slide wrong. Jeff Floor is here taking over Animish's position. Brian?
Thanks, Lana. As Lana said, I was one of the project engineers at the Lakeside Athletic Center project up in North Seattle. So a little bit about the project. About 63,000 square feet. Consisted of a competition gym with permanent seating for 800 people, several practice courts. It's called the Field House. It's more of a practice gym environment. Wrestling room, strength and conditioning, sports medicine, locker rooms, offices, event space. Some kind of key things about the project was we had a very confined duration schedule. The project was originally intended to be phased, but after getting into it and reviewing it, we decided as a cost-saving measure and for the betterment of the school to do it in one go. And the big confining element to that was basketball season. So we basically had the off season to demo the existing facility and build a new one in its place. And luck would have it, the Lakeside Lions, that first season that we were there, went all the way to the state championship. And so, that just pushed us even farther back. We were able to shuffle them around a little bit. Another big piece of this was we had a fantastic collaborative approach with Element Architects and ourselves throughout the whole process, from conceptual estimating all the way to finished product. So this is we're featured in the DJC with some of our MEP partners and designers, kind of about the approach and pre-planning, and it was a very nice article, I thought. So Lana was talking about this +1 idea, and one thing we tried at Lakeside for the first time was virtual layout. And so it's a two-part process. The first part involves applying discrete points to elements within the model. So you can kind of see these. Do I have a cursor here? You see these? This number here, work package. So this was our work package 36. And this was the discrete number after it. And what that is it's an actual point in the model. We take that, we assign key points to any place we want layout to happen. We export that from Revit into a CSV file, so it's simply an X, Y, and a Z. We actually take it and embed that in the work package that goes out in the field. We use for this operation, we use tablets instead of paper drawings for the field, especially the layout guys to use. And then from that, they are able to take that CSV and upload it directly into a robotic total station. So they have a sea of points out in front of them where they can just take the traveling end of that total station and walk out, and it tells them that's exactly where that point is. That's exactly where this point is. Then go and do all their layout that way, and they don't need to have backer boards on the ground. They don't need to be pulling tapes and strings, and it's phenomenal to watch it happen. And so this is an example of a ramp and wall, and the layout that was done that way. You can actually see it. That's this ramp wall right here. So this is kind of we used it to support our subcontractors' layout as well. So what we have here is an embed in a column, and this is a knife. These are the plates that get welded to it to carry the steel. And we went into Revit and you could see them right here. This was the one to locate the embed itself, and this was the one to locate the knife plate. And when you push the model to Navis, those come through as well. And so it's just neat to see that. This is an example of the roving end of the total station. So there's a receiver. This is the receiver itself. He's taking it off. And it's pointing a laser on the ground right there. And so he goes in and puts a mark on the ground. Put your embed there. Another example of using this tool was we had a existing berm in the back corner of the site, and we were trying to communicate with the civil engineer about how this looks now. And the easiest way to do it was we just went out there and grabbed a bunch of points, created a CSV, brought them into Revit, and connected the dots. We exported that as a CAD background, and the civil engineer was able just to move the lines around, and we were able to go to town on it. So, this is another example. What was going on here was when we were flying these trusses in, we had our surveyor shoot in the peak of that. So this is this this is the competition gem. So this is a pretty significant span, and we shot in the very tip of the steel member, and we brought that back in the model, and we determined that we were less than 5/8 inch different than what the model was intended to be, and so that includes all the beam deflection, lots of variables, and it was just neat to see as well. So that's all I have about Lakeside. So questions, or if Jeff would like to say anything?
Well, one thing that I would point out, you had the shot of the guy standing on the metal deck, and at that point in the project, they had asked us about, I think, 2 RFIs about layout where we had missed giving them a dimension, and I got a call from Brian and said, when you guys answer these, are you just going into your model and adding another dimension? I said, well, yeah, so the model's the source, right? Yeah, so can we just use that? And that's where we made the decision. We're totally comfortable with that because we have confidence in our model. And so it not only saved them time in the field, it saved us the hassle of the shuffling the paperwork of RFIs. You know, who knows how many dimensions we left out that would have been useful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is how we laid out all of our walls. I mean, we supported our framing subcontractor in providing them with their layout, and it worked fantastically. So.
Are you guys using laser scanning for quality control measures?
So we explored laser scanning, and our UW Bothell team used it for some of their work. But at Lakeside, we had a few instances where we considered doing it, but we were able to use this tool to get the same, we were able to extrapolate the same information, and it was readily available to us.
So the only problem with the laser scans is your point cloud is so large that it's almost impossible to differentiate items. So we actually ended up hiring another company, and I don't know if you remember, but he went in and he used the total station and took points on actual elements in the building as opposed to doing the full scan, and it made it a much more manageable file than doing a full laser scan. Because we did do a laser scan in one area, and the BIM coordinator, he probably sat at his desk for a week trying to differentiate. We did an entire building in a week with this other system. So laser scan is not my favorite.
We set up the Revit model to use the same coordinates that they would be using, those points come across as it's just an X, Y, and a Z, so let me back up. You got to locate the total station initially, and once that happens, it all lines up. So.
How often do you guys share your model with LPL?
Just as often as they ask for it. And I think during the 10 months of construction, it was just a couple times. During design, it was like every week.
Yeah.
And we'd use new format and do shared folders, and all the consultants' models are in there, and whenever anybody would update it, everybody would get an email that, oh, download an updated model here. So that was routine during design. They were doing takeoffs then too, and they were doing stuff that was kind of almost invisible to us. We'd look and say, what is that schedule? What are all these parameters that are suddenly showing up in our model? Oh, that's LCL. They're using it to quantify the sheetrock or whatever else. And it's like, okay, cool. Glad to know you're doing that.
That was hugely valuable to us. We went through a lot of design charrettes and pricing exercises, and having LMN's model always available to us, the current iteration, made the pricing activities much smoother. But when we transferred into construction, we kind of started using, we use the Elements wall layout extensively. However, once we get our federated model and have all of our subs on board, you know, we're using their models at that point. So. That's a very good question. So as you would imagine, certain scopes are hard to buy out with modeling involved, just because it's new to them. I know our Bothell team did an excellent job in coaching a sub who had never done it before, all the way to being a pretty top performer, so to speak, as far as with the integrity of their model. And it comes down to some subcontractors put a premium on it, so you got to sell it. So.
Yeah, and just kind of off the top of my head, I mean, realistically, the only ones we didn't have model were like the landscapers, the flooring contractor, and the final clean contractor. Almost everybody else in the project had some sort of modeling aspect. Or if not modeling, they had to at least coordinate with the model.
Yeah.
There was another question that came up earlier about, I think Rob was asking it about the architectural intent that's not modeled. And it was made very clear that the model is not the contract on Lakeside. I don't know what you did on Bothell, but the two-dimensional drawings, those are the contract. Right. And it was understood that nobody is going to, at least during design, get into the gnats behind on modeling this stuff. It'd be a waste of time.
It was the same way on the Bothell project. The 2D drawings were the contract documents, and the model is just something that everyone kind of accepted as being, this is what we're going to build to, but at the same time it's going to relate back to what those contract drawings say.
Yeah, and every work package that goes out the door, it's not like we just take cuts out of the model and go. I mean, they're constantly vetted with the contract documents to make sure they match. And if they don't match, then a BIM Com or an RFI is written to capture that difference somehow.
And having multiple different models all brought together, you can easily see if somebody made a mistake. So like if Dan raised the floor up for 2 feet for some reason, then the drywall contractor would come and be like, hey, how come your wall's 2 feet in the air here? Be like, oh, well, I just missed a digit. So, so there's a lot of kind of back checking in that aspect also when you bring multiple different models together.
Yeah. One thing I'll add from the design side is, as we've said several times now, you're probably catching the theme that not one model is ever complete. It takes all the models to come together to build something. I applaud Lewis for how they approach it, in that if there was a little hiccup in our model or in the architect's model, it was, hey, we're seeing a conflict, let's get together and figure it out. There was never your model is wrong. We're asked, how do we like sharing our models with the contractor? We don't have any problem with it, but to be brutally honest, the first time we get the call from the contractor say your model's wrong, that's going to cost me more money, it just stopped the conversation, because we can't come at it from that approach if we're going to take this kind of hierarchy when we get together and work. We know there's hiccups in the architect's model, we know there's ones in our model, we know there's ones in theirs, it's just a team effort.
But at some point, if you're relying on 2D documents to be about contract, you end up with the contract documents following the dog, because you're using the model to build from. So then the 2D documents are simply going to be recording decisions that were made via the working model.
Yeah, but I guess where I'm from that aspect, there are so many things that are still text in how to build stuff, and this quality of this and this quantity of that.
I'm not talking about specification material, or the material that's the quality aspects, just the quantity aspects.
Yeah.
Quantity and location is all the drawings that you make for the BIM. At some point, your contract drawings, not the specs, and the rest of the project manual, are simply following along behind the model, because you're all using the model, which I applaud and I agree with using the model. Why not make the model
But,
How do you capture things like flashing and trim?
I want to ask the question a different way. What would it take for each of you on your next project to use the model as a concept document?
A lot
A
more
client.
a lot, a willing client, a lot more fee. Just honestly, because if you want to use the model as a contract, that means, and I'm just talking from the structural aspect, I got to model every single bolt. I have to model every single weld, and we don't do that.
But you draw every single bolt as well?
No.
Why would we have to do that in the model? Yeah, bingo.
Because you just said that if it's not in the model, you're not able to see how to do it.
So typically on a drawing,
What I'm hearing is that most of our details in Revit still aren't tied directly to a model. It's a chart, it's a graph, it's this kind of beam, it's this type of moment or bolts and everything. And that's, in my head, that's still a 2D. It's digital, but it's 2D. It's not the model.
Sure. It's
So.
2D until you grab those details, those schedules.
Yeah.
The structural note sheet, and all these things
Yeah.
shove into the model and stick it together electronically.
Yeah, well, and I guess that's the way I'm defining it in my head, isn't the digital package, it's could you build from this model without ever looking at a 2D detail. So that was when I was replying back, we can't go there. I mean, quite honestly, we don't plot our drawings anymore. We post a model. Maybe we send them to PDF because a plotter can handle them, a plot agency can handle them easier. But if you just wanted us to release a model with all the detail sheets attached, and you said, hey, don't worry about plotting anything, we'll use this to build, I'm comfortable with that.
yeah, so this is a great conversation, but I think this is going to be something that we're going to be discussing for years to come. So, like I said earlier, our documents, they tell us we have to produce 2D, as-built and 2D all this stuff, but that's the kind of the next thing is like how do you change the contract language, not only for the design team but for the contractors and subcontractors to use that model. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the ROI and the metrics on the UW-B3 project. The owner was very interested to see kind of what their return on their investment for going with this 100% BIM coordination. And so some of the challenges we had in our job is we had an accelerated schedule. We were building from 45% documents, as I said a little bit ago. The BIM process requires a level of collaboration that we have kind of touched on, whereas the kind of the traditional construction communication is I lob a question over the fence and wait 7 days to 2 weeks to get an answer back. With our schedule, we just didn't have that kind of timeline. A lot of times we had questions answered the same day. And then we needed to concentrate on selecting subcontractors who can perform in this environment, and at the same time guiding some of our smaller tier subs through the BIM process. In no case did any of our subs balk at doing the BIM when they saw it in their bid packages. We did have one sub come to us after he bid and said, I'll tell you the truth, we don't have a BIM department, but can you help me? And we not only kind of helped him with the software, helped him kind of get his whole BIM department started. So one of the things the university wanted to take a look at was on the structure. They're typically used to seeing a lot of overtime to get the structure change orders back on schedule so that now the MEP guys can get in and get everything placed. And so they took a look at 3 of their current projects as well as ours. And the use of overtime on our job, we actually had 0 overtime for change orders, which is, you can kind of see from the graphic that, in most of their jobs they're used to seeing, in talking in square footage, upwards of an average of $2 per square foot in just construction change orders. And that's through 100% of the structure. So risk contingency, the university typically allows 2 to 2.5% of the contract value. And they use that for buyout errors, coordination issues, and interferences between different subcontractors. On our job, we've used 0, and we're about 95, 98% complete. As far as change orders on the job, they want to take a look at the main 3 largest contracts, so structural, mechanical, electrical. And as you can kind of see, change orders to date, we're 90% complete, and we've, basically got a fraction of 1% in change orders. And actually, a majority of those, 90% of those change orders are owner-induced change orders. One of the biggest ones is the 3rd and 4th floor. We ended up adding 6 offices. And that was, you know, the day before we were going to lay carpet. So we were fairly complete on both those floors. And a lot of the charges on that was actually related to expediting doors. So, and so like I said earlier, the university wanted to see, you know, what's our, you know, does our BIM investment pay off? And so strictly looking at the structure package, you know, when we're done with the MEP, we'll take a look at those also. But right now, 100% done on the structure package. The university is basically seeing 158% return on their investment. And that's based on the 3 current jobs and with an average cost per change per square foot around $2. So they got a pretty good return on their investment. So after they saw those numbers, they wanted to go back and take a look over the last 10 years at all major projects. And the only way they could get it kind of apples to apples was to take a look at the base contract work and then take the number of RFIs, you know, kind of based on the base contract work. So for every $35,000 of work in place, they would expect to see 1 RFI. For every $87,000 worth of work, they would expect to see a change order. With those numbers on our job, you would expect to see 1,284 RFIs and 517 change orders. So on UWB3, we actually we had 1 RFI or BIMCon for every $135,000 of work in place, and for every 1 change order for every $390,000 of work in place. Meaning we had 320 RFIs and 115 change orders. And like I said a second ago, the 115 change orders were mostly due to owner changes, adding systems, and then also starting at 45%, our initial contract was only the structure package and a couple other items, and we actually ended up change ordering in every single big package as it came along, so that's all included in those change orders. So basically the future state, you know, UW-Bothell is a great example of that. We have roughly 75% fewer questions, 78% fewer change orders. We got a better quality of work in place, virtually no field fixes, and higher worker morale and better productivity. What it came down to is, you know, everybody out in the field didn't want to be that one guy that caused the problem. And so he wanted to make sure that he installed it as the model showed it. And because of that, I mean, you know, this is probably one of the smoothest jobs in the field I've ever worked on, so. All right, so that concludes that. Any questions? Or, oh, got it.
I think we've luckily had a pretty lively conversation throughout, so we probably have time for 1 or 2 more questions, but I think that we raised a lot more questions probably that we're going to answer. I will just point out, let me bring up, there are a couple of events coming up that address some of these things, so I just figured that I would let you know about it. The seminar group is putting together on March 26th a symposium having to do a lot with legal issues. I mean, I think there's obviously a disconnect. Everybody in this room understands Revit and BIM and what we can do with it, but you know, at the end of the day, the contracts ask us to do a certain thing that doesn't necessarily work all that well with the workflows that we're now discovering. So I would encourage you to check it out. There's AI continuing credit if you're interested in that. And then in April, the AGC holds the BIM Forum in Boston this time. And they have, I believe that the keynote speaker is CEO from HOK, and they're very focused on how BIM drives design and affects design. And it's a really interesting conference. I would encourage you to check it out. So please join me in thanking this wonderful panel. I mean, I think this was a really great presentation. And hopefully you agree with me that we got off the year off to a very strong start. Our next meeting will be March 19th, and I'll be putting out information about that project or that meeting as we get it. Now, one final piece of business is if you sign up in RSVP through the meetup, you get your name put into this little envelope, and you get to participate in a little raffle about these little Amazon gift cards. And if you're a +1, then your name is not in here, so I would encourage you to sign in. So I mentioned earlier this was my first meeting ever hosted, so I got a really nice surprise when I got to the library this morning, and that's my wife, Blair, wanted to come down and see me, so she showed up, and I'm going to put her on the spot and ask her to pick a couple of names out of the paper envelope, so if you will, please. Oh, absolutely. Got the sealed envelope from our accountants.
Price Street Waterhouse.
Why don't you pick 2? All right. Hamad Rashid. All right. And Evan, I'm going to butcher this up, is it Bruquard? All right. Well, thanks everybody, and hopefully we'll see you next month, and we'll have another great program for you then.